Other things to take note of in your templates are your custom families. I'll show you a project here, a sample. It's a data set that we use in training that has from 2018 that has errors within the families, and I'll show you how to troubleshoot those things and how to tell what's happening in your projects and how to get some clues on where that issues or errors are. Of course, some basic fabrication settings that are unique to fabrication in your options, of course, in your settings. We'll talk about those. And then, of course, within templates and projects, there's a new feature within 2021 and 2022 for images and PDFs and linking versus having to import. And when you maybe put in logos or images in your project templates, for your project start page, say for instance, there could be some pathing issues. So I'll kind of show you some of that new stuff with 2022 that you might encounter in a template. And then, of course, like I said, one of the big things that you guys need to really take note of when you're working with projects and you have a company template is any changes or updates. There should be a process for that. There should be documentation. And make sure that you guys come up with some type of way to make sure that your users, when they maybe update a filter, change a color, update the view template in any way or the views in any way that's beneficial to your company standards or beneficial to the project, you want to save that for the following project, right? So if you have it all documented, you'll know what's different, what's new from the previous project. So as a project manager or a model manager, you'll be able to take the last project and do a couple of things I'll show you here to ensure you're updating the templates correctly for the next project, right? That's kind of the process. You want to just keep improving. One thing when it comes to templates that we'll talk about that's unique to fabrication are your filters and services when it comes to your database. So you need to make sure or ensure that your databases are labeled properly so that we can set up filters properly in the Revit world for fabrication. All right, let's talk a little bit let me show you a little bit about templates here. Let's get into this real quick. Let me show you something here. Let me get into a file here. Now, this audit command we're going to get into when it comes to optimization. But whenever I use the audit, and I recommend this to everyone, whenever you're opening up a project or a file in Revit, you need to always use the open command. I always tell everybody in my fundamentals course, this is rule number 1. You have to use the open because this is really the only place to audit. This warning is pretty ominous, but again, you can ignore it. I'm just going to continue on here to kind of talk about this example. But always audit. If you guys take away a habit in these webinars that I do is make sure you audit every time you open up a project. Now, there's not a lot in this project, but I want you to kind of take a look over here under the project browser and say this is a project that I started from a blank template, right? We have generic out-of-the-box stuff set up in here. We don't have any schedules, no sheets, right? My family's list here kind of is missing certain items. I can tell right off the bat, right? What you can do when you're trying to, maybe this is a project that you're getting from the engineers, right? And you need to start to bring in your standard into the design intent model, which is kind of what this model is here. You can certainly, what we do or what I recommend doing is when you have a company template already established, right? And this is just a sample here. What you can do is you can open up the template side by side with the project and you can share. You can kind of transfer information in between. Now, this is again Revit 2022. And why would I have a reference error in my template, right? This is something that I left in there because I wanted you guys to see what's new here. So of course, I don't have any Revit links that are typical or CAD or any of that, right? That's good. You don't want any of that stuff in there. PDFs, I don't, but images. Say this is like a logo here for your company. I set this up earlier and it comes up with not found because I moved the logo, and all that kind of good stuff. I mean, I can remove this or I can reload it, from its, where I need it reloaded from, right? But this is, again, where you can link in images and things like that. At this point, if this is for my start screen, it wouldn't be a link. I would certainly then do this as an import. And in 2022, you still have the import image option here. But with all the best practices to consider in the Revit world, right, you always want to double or triple, check or triple consider, this importing CAD, anything CAD importing, right? We want to link that stuff. PDFs and images, kind of be very careful with that stuff. Don't just bring that stuff in willy-nilly. Make sure you have a good plan. And, for the start screen, maybe company logo, that kind of stuff, it would be an import rather than a link, right? The links would be there for, say, like equipment layout, stuff like that. That's what you would want to make sure you link in an image, right, in your templates or your projects. Other things that I have in this template here that I need are like my schedules, right? I need schedules into my project. I need under the View tab for fabrication. Filters are a big one, right? I have filters here. And again, these filters are set up by certain rules, right? So you have a couple of options when you're working with fabrication items like service and service name abbreviation, those types of things. If you need custom, values here for your filter rules, that's where your shared parameters come into play, right? So along with your templates you should also have a comprehensive shared parameters file, right? So that's something that needs to be worked on so that you can pull this, all this, any custom information so that you can set up your filters and your view templates by, service or what have you, okay? Schedules are another thing that in the past, what we would do is we would right click on a schedule from a template. Again, I don't have those defined in my project and I need to bring in a schedule. You wouldn't be as an end user bringing in every schedule, but maybe there's one that's new in the latest template that I don't have in the project that we're already in, right? And I need to use it. What we would do is we would right click here and save this file out, right, as a separate RVT. Now, come to find out, that's the long way around because of what I was talking about earlier when it comes to, I'm going to cancel that, when it comes to schedules now in Revit. I can actually take this schedule here, this fabrication decoil straight schedule. Actually, I'll do the fittings, duct fittings. And I can right click on this and I can create a view template from that view. What creating a view template from the view, and I'll just do kind of simple here, duct fittings. What that'll allow me to do is create a template so that I can utilize the template, view template schedules, right, to transfer between projects rather than trying to transfer over entire schedules, right? So I can do something like this here. And what I mean by that is this. Now, when I go back into my project, all I really need to do is under the Manage tab in my project, there's under Settings here is this Transfer Project Standards option. And then this is the real trick of the whole deal here is making sure you're pulling from the right file. So I'll copy from that default template, my company standard there. And you never want to do a check all, right? So I always do check none. You can create, here's a good tip for like 1920. I think they might have improved this in the newer versions, but it might still take effect. If say for instance, you already have browser organization in here, when you bring in browser organization from a template, it's going to bring in also project parameters so that when you do generate custom views or any kind of view, it's automatically putting it into the right subcategories or subdisciplines, and you don't have to go and be finding those views all over in the question marks, right? So that's one of the big ones when you're starting from scratch for fabrication. Other options, of course, that you want to bring over maybe like are your filters, right? And then of course, like my view templates, project parameters. There is a specific project parameters list. And then down here at the bottom, I transfer over not viewport types, but view templates. So again, you don't want to like do all of these because there might be like wall settings, conduit, those types of things that you don't need in your templates or in your projects for fabrication. This is just the stuff that you're going to need to bring over from a, say, a company default template. Now, once I do that, right, I'll transfer that over. And this is kind of like an AutoCAD if you're doing like, content browser and you're just bringing styles over. It's just exactly kind of what I did there. I brought some information over into this project. And on the View tab here is where you can manage those filters. Those will all be in here now, new ones, and then my View templates as well. There's that duct fittings one, right? I can filter this list out for just schedules, and now I've got all my schedule templates in here. Now, why do I have these in here, and what do we use them for, right? Well, again, in a project, I can go in here and I can create a new schedule, and I'm just going to create what we call a placeholder, right? So I'll use the duct work schedule in here, and I'll just call this fittings. So it's fabrication ductwork fitting schedule. And I'm just going to use alias as a placeholder. Now with this schedule here, I can then right click and apply because I just transferred that in from my company template or project template into this project and use that duct fittings template or assignment right there, and it fixes it to follow my default standards, right? So I can create schedules from my templates. So one thing to maybe add or consider adding or creating is if you have your schedules already created in a template, I would also recommend creating View templates. And now the trick to this here, this is kind of what I do, is using the copy, paste, and rename thing, right? So I'll get it to what it is, like the proper name, and I'll copy the name first here, like to rename it, and then I'll say create a View template from the View, and then of course I'll put my brand, and then I'll put in the name that I just used, and that becomes now my View template for my schedules, right? So now I can kind of, again, maybe make it a little bit more formal. Got 3 of them in here, and of course, you don't want to have to bring in all of this if you don't need it, the sorting and grouping and all that. Mostly with schedules, you do the phase filter. These are all okay to do, but you can bring in just specific fields, maybe filters only, whatever, or sorting and grouping, right? That kind of stuff. So, and then of course, you can always now also, if you guys are not sure, I can right click and duplicate schedules as well. So if you need to, there's some new options in here that you can also pick up for 2022. All right, so now that I've gotten my schedules into my template or my project here, right? That's one way with my default, settings that I might be missing from a template. Another thing that you can do with the template here is this, and this is kind of a faster way. I just learned this one through some friends of ours that are some coworkers that are developers for some of our internal tools. I didn't know this, but you can select all of your schedules in the template and right click and copy to the clipboard, right? There's no real command here, but if I go into my other project here, there's no right click and paste schedules, right? So that kind of would have thrown me off initially. Well, if you immediately do this with both of them side by side like this, under the modify tab, I think one of the most underutilized commands is the clipboard. I can just hit the paste command or Control V, and it'll automatically paste my schedules in without me having to go ahead and do a placeholder as well. So again, if you're missing things, or if you've got to recreate, purge, or you're missing, View templates and filters, if they're and defined in your templates, that could again help users speed up in the creation of that in the project that they're working on. So this is kind of a workflow if we're working within the design intent model, and we need our fabrication stuff in there so we can start to regenerate these as our own, right? So again, a good strong template can really help that. Now, once you do all these little fixes or updates, then you're going to need to document that stuff, right? So that's huge. Is being able to make sure that you go back and document what's been changed, what's been updated. If you made any tweaks to any of these schedules or filters, you're going to need to go back and make sure that for the next project, everybody knows what's been changed. speaking of that, with documentation and templates, before we move on to the next one here, there is, like for us, this is just an example for our company, Applied Software. What we do is we create a spreadsheet here, and in the spreadsheet, this is, kind of has everything for Revit period and design. But in here, we'll create a spreadsheet in Excel of every setting that we have that's custom to the project, view templates and filters. These are just basic examples, but we'll document it all so that if any of that stuff changes, you can come back in, set it to a color, like a color code, maybe like a neutral or needs input, or bad, maybe it doesn't work or something. And for the next project, we fix that or create a new solution for it, right? Or update that solution. So keeping track or documentation is pretty big, I think, especially when you're trying to update and keep making it better and better. How do you know where that stuff is or what you had in the previous one? If you don't document it, you really won't know. Okay, so document any kind of change. It doesn't have to be Excel. It doesn't have to be this. It can be any method that you guys use, Word or whatever, to keep track of any changes and updates in those templates. Okay. Let's see. So we did schedules, view templates. You talked about that. The browser organization. The last thing here before we move into the optimization part is the shared parameters file, right? Make sure you have your company shared parameters file associated to your projects or to your users. They need to know where or have that set up. Project parameters as well. Like these are some of those that I brought in to help me set up my views when created, the view type and view purpose. So you might have those. I believe subdiscipline is really the only default one in Revit for MEP. That is a project parameter. Okay. Before also talking about this here with setup under options here, let me talk about this real quick. Here's a good one that I talk about with all my training students is the view options here under options. This might be something you set up for your users so that when they do generate custom views or custom 3D views, they default to a mechanical discipline for all fabrication, regardless if you're plumbing or mechanical, duct or pipe, only maybe still use mechanical, and it'll force the views that you create, like the selection box and the custom 3D views that you make on the fly. You can default those to mechanical, and they're not architectural or coordination where you're not actually seeing the content. You're seeing the walls and structure, which is not what you want for fabrication. Another thing for you guys that are model managers and that are doing templates, right? This is where you can set up and add your template. So I can browse here for where my template file location is, and I can set up the template in my setup here. Oops, not add, move up. I'm going to move those into position. Maybe, I wouldn't get rid of them all unless, they're just end users and not really ever going to set up projects. I would leave the default and this one here, maybe even a plumbing one. The system one is a good one. Electrical and construction, you probably don't need, but you can leave, what you want there. And then the last thing that here's where you really want to make sure for when you're working in a work shared environment, right? This path right here. So when you create your projects, and we're going to get this to optimization in a second, is that the file locations is really important for your local files, right? And this path we'll get to in a second is really important. I create a folder for it so I can manage all my local files. And then, of course, down here at the bottom under file locations are your custom libraries. So when you're in a template, you don't want to load in or overload your templates with too many families. So, say you got 1,000 variations, you want to use single types, maybe not one family with 100 types in it. Try to, split that up if possible, if they're custom families. Also, this is where, again, when you want your users to have access to the company family directory, right, where, they're using the families they should be using instead of the Imperial out-of-the-box ones for Revit, they still need access to that just in case, because these here are kind of quality controlled, and a lot of the times you just need a physical body there that represents the information, and other times you need the actual, correct family. And you can add your own new custom libraries here so that your users have access to those libraries. And that's really going to help them make sure they're putting in the right content in the project, especially if it's not already preloaded, right? You want to use the families sparingly and load them in on an as-needed basis. So you should give them access to that here under what we call places, file location, places. It's kind of hidden in here. You have to hit that button and then hit the plus sign here to add them. Okay. All right. I think those are the main things when it comes to project templates that you'll need to, make sure that you double check so you can, here like schedules, right? The families do not transfer, like loadable families, they don't transfer over in the transfer project standards. The only thing that really transfers from transfer project standards are settings and configurations. Now, system families do, like Revit, pipe, and duct transfer over definitions, but that's about it family-wise. There's nothing really, like loadable families, like your custom content. Print settings is another thing that transfers over. I think that's about it. Okay. Here's a real quick tip for you guys. Let me get out of this here. Let me move back here. Let me close out of this and the template here. So model optimization is something that I want to cover next real quick, and we'll write some tips and tricks down here in a second. Let me open up a project here. Project or model optimization, it's either way. It's in the project, right? One thing to take note of when you're working or when you're trying to consider how to best optimize the project or model for performance, right? One thing that I just recently, I've remembered this from way back when, but I thought they've improved this by now. But one thing that I did realize that I need to kind of make sure that everybody knows from here on out is, you have 10 users, right? And maybe 2 of the users are more project managers, admins or, project setup people that are in the model, but maybe they don't have like the latest and greatest computer. Maybe they have the 5 or 7-year-old laptop. The actual project team that you're working on, the other 8 have the latest and greatest computers, laptops. They've got the best systems. What I recently realized here or read was that on the Autodesk website, I'll show you where I got this information from, but it says if you have users that are on the project, in a work shared project, that have like an older hardware system, that are not up to par with everybody else's, it can lag or reduce performance in the model. And so, if you have those 2 guys that are not really pushing the project, but when they're in it, it starts to bog the project down a little bit. So that might be something to consider if you guys have, teams where you guys are all in-house and you do have, knowledge of each computer's hardware requirements, system requirements. That's one thing to take, seriously when it comes to Revit is, and I tell this to all my classes, is to, you make sure you clean up your computers, right? Make sure your software is up to date. That's really the big one. Especially in a work shared environment, if you have mixed versioning, like even if it's like 2020, 2020.1, 2020.1.2, and say 2020.1.3, right? There's 10 of us and we all have a variation of those. In a work sharing environment, that could cause issues or corruption. So you want to make sure everybody's on the latest and greatest builds. The project start view, initially the start view was for something like, a bulletin board where you could put information, company logos, project information, best practices, how to use the project or how to manage your content in the models or whatever. Just kind of warnings or tips and tricks for users that they can read when they get into a project. It also is set up for kind of opening up the project faster. A project start view, if it's a simple view, it'll load fast. If you've got it saved to a complicated high resolution image or whatever, it's going to open up a little bit longer. It's going to take a longer to open up, right? For a model management standpoint, I'm going to show you what, when we get into the optimization here in a minute in Revit, I'll show you what a quick example of something you can do when it comes to a project start view that might help from a project manager's perspective. Of course, when you're in a Revit project to optimize performance, you want to remove all linked or non-essential links and imports, right? One thing with fabrication, say you're getting the design intent model and you're working right directly in it using the transfer product standards like I showed you. But in that CAD file, you didn't know that they exploded like 10 or 20 different CAD files, and there's just thousands of elements just all over the place in Revit. Single lines or detail lines like that in a Revit model are pretty much just kind of like are going to bog it down. They're like any kind of exploded CAD file in the Revit world is going to really be detrimental to that project. So be very careful with AutoCAD, and that's one of the biggest things that we find in our models today via support is exploded CAD files can cause massive impacts on performance. And one of the other things that recently came up was, if you have view templates set up for elevations or sections, you always want to make sure that the CAD files or the CAD links are turned off in perpendicular views. So like elevations and sections. If you have a CAD underlay for equipment and in a floor plan view, and you're cutting a section across it, in the section and 3D views, you're going to want to make sure that the CAD files are turned off because it's going to reduce performance big time in the models for MEP. As well as we use hidden line as a recommendation or best practice, but now the best practice is wireframe from MEP. So keep that in mind as well. Making sure that you review warnings in the linked files, or making sure that you do maybe perform some kind of audit or coordination review with the linked models is important as well. Kind of making sure you can get any of that stuff resolved so you don't introduce any issues into your model. Work sharing, MEP, if you're having problems with connected networks and updating, here's one thing to note about what's different in 2021 and 2022 with fabrication is, how duct and pipe would self-heal? If you removed a coupling, it would automatically repair itself. Well, they've removed that functionality in these new versions of fabrication. And the reason for that is because it was causing issues with work sets. If you had a piece that was connected to a system, that entire system was being checked out instead of a piece at a time. So now that each individual part is actually an individual part, work sets should be a lot more efficient in the newer versions. So you guys and gals that are in the older versions of Revit, 19 and 20, there's been a lot of improvements to work sharing and optimization of fabrication parts, conversions, a lot of enhancements, in 2022 as well for fabrication. So, look forward for those improvements, and a lot of the issues you might be seeing now with those older versions get improved or fixed. Okay, in future projects. One of the big ones when it comes to optimization in projects for fabrication is, let me get into a model here. Let me show you guys something real quick. It'll be here under fabrication settings. So I show everybody this in training when you're working with your fabrication database and your services and say, I need to reload or fix my chilled water supply service or my supply air service or something like that. I need to make changes to the connectors, to the optimized links or what have you, values, or maybe even update the information so that, again, my services are the same service, but I need, to be able to use some service option here for my filters that are not necessarily correct, right? Well, one thing that you guys need to take note of is this down at the bottom when you're in fabrication settings is this hyperlink right here. Learn how to set fabrication settings. Let me show you this real quick. This is rule number 1 when you're working with fabrication settings. So specify a fabrication configuration and load services, right? So when you are in a work shared environment, right, and changes need to be made to the configuration, which is basically the database. So any of those kind of changes need to be made. All users working in the model should synchronize and then close the model, right? And I don't think everybody is doing that right now, right? Not everybody is synchronizing, having everybody get out of the model and then make the changes to the configuration, right? This is at your fingertips here, so it's in the hyperlink. You don't have to write that down. It's always going to be here. It's rule number one when you're working with fabrication services in a project. This is going to help make sure that you're not getting any errors or issues when you're trying to work with the database, make changes and updates and get all these issues. There'll be some parentheses here with text, saying that the services is invalid or something like that. And again, those are for, they've made improvements to this in the newer versions. And I'll show you again here in a second when I pull up this here. Let me show you something real quick. Revit 22. This is a note that I do want you guys to write down. If you hit the F1 command, right, the question mark up here, or the F1, or hit a hyperlink in a dialog box, it basically takes you to what I call the Revit book, right? Let's see here. The Revit book is this digital book that comes with Revit. It's a free, it comes with the software. You hit the question mark. And everything you need to know about the software is in here, over here on the left-hand side, right? For you guys that are kind of looking for new and improvements, this is something that I always go to double check. It's called the release notes in the F1 or question mark here. And issues resolved, right? And I always scroll down here and I go and look straight for MEP fabrication. There's duct and pipe information fixes there. If you're looking for updates and what's changed, all right, keep going down. These are the E's. Keep going to the M's down here at the bottom. Keep going. Here we go. MEP connector fixes, MEP fabrication, right? Oh, man, I just lost it. Sorry about that. Can go back down. Where did it go? Go too far. There we go. Sorry. Here we go. MEP fabrication. For Revit 22, right? This is in the 2022 version, so the version that you're in, fixed in issues, right? With route and fill, with performance, MEP fabrication commands. So there's a lot that has been fixed for fabrication in the latest version, right? So you see what's been resolved. And then the enhancements, same thing. I scroll down to the MEP side of things, and it's all here, what they've improved or what they've fixed in the latest version, right? So they've changed the name from group to palette, back little stuff like that. Reloading features retain override length values on modeled instances, right? Design to fabrication improvements. So if you guys that are doing, that are, trying to stay on top of what's new, what's actually being fixed and improved with the fabrication component in Revit, this is where you look. It's always going to be here. Always double check when the new version comes out on what they fixed and what's going to help you out. Again, that hyperlink here will take you directly to that web page to talk about, how, again, you want to make sure that when you're in a work shared environment or working with a central file, you follow these rules. If you follow these rules, how do we keep from, having this stuff, kind of turn on us in Revit? Well, you just got to follow some basic best practices, and these are some of them, okay? Let me go back here. Give me 1 second. All right. So the next thing that I want to cover here is going to be the big one, which is really going to be kind of, again, not everybody should be doing this, with the exception of some of these. Like the purge unused, that's, the nuclear option, right? You don't want to, it's like exploding things in AutoCAD. You don't just purge things willy-nilly, because it'll remove, settings and configurations that maybe just haven't been used yet, depending on where you are in the project, like filters, view templates, that kind of stuff. It's not going to remove anything that's already there. So when do you do this? Again, I would purge unused at issues, when you're issuing, a check or an update, or at the end of the model, make sure you always purge it out, because you're pretty much, at 90%, when you're almost 90% done. A good purge is really going to help improve the performance of the model and reduce file size. So it's really going to make, that late in a project is okay. The audit functionality is upon open only. So if you guys have users that are old school like me, I come from the old AutoCAD days, back in release 9, we double click through Windows File Explorer to open up our CAD files. That's a no-no, or that's not acceptable in the Revit world, right? Not even with AutoCAD anymore. You can't even double click on AutoCAD files, or you shouldn't. You should be using the open command. And in the open command is really the only place you can audit a model. So you can't do that any other place. And I always get asked, what does it do? It basically fixes corrupted elements in the model. If there's been, bad families, the families, some of the when you have multiple types can go corrupt. It just really depends on the way the family was created. Like we have valves and pipe families that have been around since like 2015. And when you're trying to use those in a 2022 project, a lot of the geometry and the program that is the X data that is built into these from way back in 2015 version does no longer exist in the Revit world now, and it causes major issues, right? So that's how the families get corrupt. They should all be updated prior to it using within the Revit project. But we're not going to keep every year. We got 1,000 families keep on updating those. There is a bulk updater option, but you need to maintain all those families in the latest and greatest version. Make sure that they've been purged, audited, and reviewed. Okay. I'm going to show you the compacting the central option here. This one also is something that should be done periodically. That's not really done a lot in the industry when you're working with the central models. There's some warnings in journal files that you can use for reviewing the project and kind of making sure that your models are working, to tip-top, shape, so that they're not, causing too many errors in the background. Some of the errors and warnings you can't fix. And then, of course, when it comes to file maintenance, you're going to want to make sure that you create backups of your central models. You guys don't have a backup system right now. And you can basically make a copy it, detach it from central, and just save a version of it, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, come up with a plan for that. But make sure that you archive your projects, especially if you have very large projects and you're noticing a lot of slow performance and all that. You need to make sure, if you can't just go run a purge all and start to cull the model out and, removing everything that you don't need. You want to make sure that you back that up, right? Always make a copy of it, detach it from central, save it in a directory somewhere that gets backed up, probably on the server. So you always have an option, right? Now, the local files are your real backup system when it comes to a central file on each user's station. But just in case, you always want to make sure that you have some other redundant backups, right? All right, so let me show you something here when it comes to these file maintenance. One thing that I was talking about here was this: when I go to open up a project, right? When I open up a project, this is the only place to audit a file, right? Now, one thing to take note of when you are working with a central file like this fabrication model, you always want to make sure that you audit. Create new local is going to create that file that I was talking about in, say, my local files directory, which is usually under documents. That's by default. I create a local files directory in here so that it puts them in a directory that I can maintain. Right? If it stays in this directory with all these other software directory folders for Windows and other software solutions, right? I'm going to have, kind of a hard time cleaning that stuff up. And one thing that people don't realize is that if there is corruption in a project and you're restoring back to a good model, if you didn't have everybody that's on the team delete their locals and to create new ones, they could be introducing that corruption back in. So if they're not in an organized structure, that's going to be hard to manage. So make sure that you organize your local files on each end user as well. Okay. And then, of course, the other thing that I want you to see was this here that I recently talked to with some of our other clients, and they really thought this was awesome and didn't know that that was there. That little black arrow, when you're working with a central file, look at this real quick. This is just a training file here, right? And if I go to the black arrow, it doesn't do anything. But when I'm in a central file, creating a local file situation, you can use this little black arrow. This is what we call demand loading, right? So this again is for optimizing performance in a model. If you're going to create work sets, I can go in here and I can say I want to open up the project with all work sets, or if I'm on level 3 only, I want to use specify like this here, and I can say I can only open when it comes up here. I only want to open up work set 1. I can turn off everything else in the background, right? So I can pick and choose which work set that I want to open up at a given time. So if it's level 3, I can open up just level 3 and not the other stuff. So again, it opens up that much faster, okay? So work sets, in your projects help with optimization or performance. When it comes to that kind of stuff, you can use a demand load and open up just what you need. Or if you're troubleshooting, you can open up everything in the project, okay? Let's see here. Now, when it comes to like managing or file maintenance in the project, under the Manage tab, there's this thing over here called the Inquiry panel. Inquiry. Manage Inquiry. And there's this warnings button here. Now, these warnings, again, can be coming from a linked file, but also can be coming from your model, right? So I've got some duct length exceeding the maximum length for flex. I've got some no loss defined warnings here. I've got some fabrication straight exceeds the standard length and optimized command, to adjust. So like this one here specifically, when it comes to like warnings in a project or for file maintenance, you're going to want to make sure that you resolve these warnings if you can. Some of them you're not going to be able to. Like the identical instances, that could probably be resolved. The only thing is like some of these here will have like the duplicate type marks. And I know with some of our firms, they use the mark field in there, and they'll have multiple marks that have the letter A, or multiple items that have the mark letter A. And it doesn't matter to them. They just need to use that as a identifier. So duplicates, they're not going to be able to help when it comes to mark values. That's okay. They understand that. So there's some of these that you're not going to be able to fix, right? Now, just kind of going back to these here, let me show you these on the warnings. Let me go back over here. Actually, it's the fabrication plan. So before I do this, let me go back again one more time. So under warnings, it was the fabrication straight exceeds, right? So we got 22 through, what do we got? 150 warning, right? 22 to 150. If I went in here with the fabrication model, and I just pick on my ductwork here, and use the optimize tool to optimize it, optimize links. There's a show related warnings there too when you have it selected. Let's take a look. Actually, let's see if show preview. Oh, select previous didn't work. Let's go back. Filter this out. Go back to my duct. Show related warnings. So I got 1 through 70 now, right? So I've cleared up most of them. Some of them are still, needs to be addressed, right? But look at this here. As I pick them, you see how it highlights it in the model here? So if I want to go to show, I can go and keep clicking show and keep trying to figure out, okay, what am I missing here? What do I need to do, right? That needs to be optimized. There's a split there. Probably drag my transition. There's a lot of little things you can do to repair that. And just do your best to get these all cleaned up as much as possible, and that will really help, again, improve performance in the models in the long run. So when I teach the convert to fabrication, I always teach on the analyze tab here on the quick access toolbar. I always use the show disconnect. So I check the design integrity of the model, right? See how many disconnects I have in the design intent model. I do the convert to fabrication, right? And check the disconnects, make sure, what's been broken or where all my disconnects are, or I've got to repair it. But before I repair or fix any of the conversions, I immediately select all and optimize links. That's going to, again, improve the performance and get rid of a lot of the simple warnings and then the rest, what's left over, I'm going to have to go and fix myself, and those I can track down. I'd rather have 70 than 122, right? So to fix. And again, some of that, I think it's just on the other side of this model. So you can kind of get that fixed as you go, okay? And then I'll also show you some like kind of out of the box stuff here in a second that you might see when it comes to warnings. As a matter of fact, let me do this. Like here in this model, I threw in some, and if I go to warnings here, you'll see even in just this sample template file with fabrication parts, I've already got warnings, right? The part specification is invalid. So like some of these warnings, right, that are very common. Let me see if I have my pull-ups here. Let me do this real quick. And so if you guys are taking notes here, I want you to write some of these notes down real quick. Some of the websites I'm going to pull up here real quick. So, and just write the titles here. So you can Google the Ultimate Guide to Revit. But that is in our applied website, right? That's going to give you a lot of this information that I'm talking about here, in general and more specifics. Let's see, part specification warning. So that I got to drag these to my desktop real quick. Hold on. Copy these. So some of these warnings, you can literally just Google these warnings and it'll give you some information like this part specification is invalid, right? Basically what that's telling me here that there's a fix in the database again, right? You got to edit the database for your breakpoints, right? Breakpoints need to be set to a higher breakpoint for the specification entry. So again, they give you, some help here on the Autodesk knowledge base, right? But like I said, also with our applied software one, you can go there and a lot of this information here is already there, right? We also have one called like how to keep your job using Revit. You guys might have attended that series or this information here for don't over model, right? All these tips and tricks and best practices for view management, as everything that you guys need to know about Revit is all well documented on our website. So take advantage of it. And then, of course, let's see, what's this last one here was like the no loss definition. I think you saw that in one of those there. And there's like a setting that you can set in your, that's for your Revit families to set for no loss definitions. And that will, again, improve performance in the model.